My wife left a note on the counter. I'm done with you. The house is sold. Pack and leave. On the back, I wrote 2 words. When she read them, 37 missed calls. My wife left a note on the kitchen counter. I'm done with you. The house is sold. Pack and leave. I read it twice before the words actually registered. The marble beneath my fingertips felt colder than it should have. My chest tightened, not from anger, not at first, but from the quiet realization that something irreversible had just happened. The house was locked behind me. The security code had been changed. My car key no longer opened the garage. And upstairs, behind the sheer white curtains, I could see her silhouette watching to make sure I understood. On the back of that note, I wrote 2 words. 3 hours later, my phone began to vibrate. I had just come back from my cardiologist when I found the note. The late October wind cut through my coat as I walked up the driveway, the maple leaves skittering across the concrete like dry bones. I remember thinking how peaceful the house looked from the outside. Warm lights glowing through the windows, smoke drifting from the chimney, the kind of home people slowed down to admire. I typed in the front door code. Red light. Access denied. I frowned and tried again, slower this time, my finger steady despite the residual tremor from the minor stroke I'd suffered 6 months earlier. Red light. I stood there for a moment, staring at the keypad as if it had personally betrayed me. Then I tried the garage. Nothing. The click of the mechanism was absent, just silence. That's when I noticed the note through the glass panel beside the door. It was sitting on the kitchen island, weighed down by a crystal paperweight we'd bought on our anniversary trip to Charleston. I walked around to the back patio where the sliding doors were unlocked. She hadn't thought of that. Not yet. The kitchen smelled faintly of rosemary and garlic. She'd cooked earlier. The dishwasher hummed softly. Everything felt disturbingly normal except for the note. I'm done with you. The house is sold. Pack and leave. No explanation, no signature, just a clean severing. I stood there longer than I care to admit. Not because I was shocked. Shock is loud. This was something quieter, something colder. Upstairs, I heard a floorboard creak. Evelyn, I called. She appeared at the top of the staircase, framed by the soft chandelier light, perfectly composed, hair pinned back, silk blouse. The same woman I'd married 17 years ago, just harder around the edges. You got it, she said. Got what? The message. I looked down at the paper again. The house is sold. Yes. You can't sell the house without my signature. She gave a small, tired smile. I don't need it. The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Evelyn, I said carefully, keeping my voice level. What are you talking about? I'm talking about reality, Daniel. She descended halfway down the stairs, stopping at a safe distance. You had a stroke. You can barely manage your medications without reminders. You forget meetings. You sleep half the day. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. I'm recovering. You're declining. The word hung between us. We accepted a cash offer, she continued. Closing is tomorrow. The buyers want immediate possession. You don't have authority to transfer the title. I have power of attorney, she said, her tone sharpening. You signed it. Remember? I did remember. After the stroke, while I was still foggy and grateful to be alive, she'd insisted it was just temporary. In case something happened, she'd said, in case you can't speak for yourself, I had signed. But I also knew exactly what that document allowed and what it didn't. You think I'm a burden? I said quietly. Her jaw tightened. I think I deserve stability. There it was. Not grief, not fear. Calculation. Who's the buyer? I asked. That's not your concern. And where am I supposed to go? She shrugged lightly. You have investments. You'll manage. I studied her face. There was something behind her eyes I hadn't noticed before. Urgency, almost panic. This wasn't about my health. This was about something else. I walked back to the counter and picked up the note. The paper was thick, expensive stationery. She'd taken time to choose it. I turned it over. On the blank side, I wrote 2 words. Check again. I set the note back exactly where she had left it. What does that mean? She asked. You'll see. I walked out the back door without another word. The air outside felt sharper now, cleaner. My heart beat steady in my chest, stronger than it had in months. I didn't drive to a hotel. I drove downtown. By the time I reached my attorney's office, I already knew what I would find. At 5:42 p.m., my phone buzzed for the first time. Evelyn. I let it ring. At 5:47 p.m., it buzzed again, then again, and again. By 8 p.m., I had 12 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I did not listen to them. Instead, I sat in my attorney's office reviewing county records on her computer screen. The quitclaim deed had been filed that morning. It bore my name, my supposed signature, except it wasn't mine. And more importantly, the house wasn't mine to transfer. It hadn't been for 12 years. When I finally stepped outside into the cold night air, my phone vibrated again. 17 missed calls. I turned it face down on the passenger seat. She thought she had removed me from the board. She didn't realize she had just made her first mistake. And tomorrow at closing, she was about to make her last. By 6:30 the next morning, my phone showed 23 missed calls. I hadn't slept much, not because I was upset, but because my mind was working. I've spent 35 years in estate planning and commercial asset structuring. When something doesn't make sense, I don't panic. I trace it. Evelyn didn't sell the house because she thought I was declining. She sold it because she was desperate. I was sitting across from Margaret Hill at 7:12 a.m. Margaret has been my attorney for 14 years. Sharp, methodical, early 40s, the kind of woman who doesn't raise her voice because she doesn't need to. She slid the county filing across her desk. She filed a quitclaim deed yesterday at 9:03 a.m. Use the POA you signed in March. And Margaret said, removing her glasses, she assumed you own the property personally. I don't. No, you don't. 12 years ago, long before Evelyn started redecorating the house in shades of white and gray, I transferred the property into the Henderson Asset Protection Trust. It was irrevocable. I was the managing trustee. The beneficiary structure was layered, clean, legal, protected. Evelyn had never cared about the mechanics. She liked outcomes, not paperwork. She can't transfer what you don't own, Margaret continued. The trust owns it. The POA gives her authority over you, not over the trust. Has the title company flagged it? Margaret gave a thin smile. They will. I leaned back in the leather chair and exhaled slowly. Closing is scheduled for 10, she said. Downtown Sterling and Wyatt cash buyers. Yes, a young physician and his wife. They wired earnest money last week. That explained the urgency. Who's representing her? I asked. Daniel, you're not going to like this. I already didn't. It's a smaller brokerage, a man named Travis Lang. I stared at the name. I'd seen it before. 3 months ago, I'd walked into our garage late at night and found Evelyn laughing into her phone. When she saw me, she'd said it's just a developer friend. Travis Lang, mid-40s, smooth real estate opportunist, over-leveraged. Pulled his business filings, I said. Margaret didn't hesitate. She turned her monitor toward me and began typing. Within minutes, a web of LLCs appeared. Half of them dissolved. Several lawsuits pending. 2 liens. Liquidity problem. She murmured. Massive one. My phone buzzed again. Evelyn. I silenced it. Margaret, I said quietly. Check joint credit lines. She paused, then accessed another portal. Her expression shifted. Daniel, how bad? Home equity line maxed. 2 personal lines drawn nearly to the limit. There's also a pending transfer request from your investment account to where William Way Beha to initiate the transfer. Margaret continued, but the bank flagged it for verification. They called you yesterday. I was in cardiology. Yes. And she assumed I wouldn't notice. Margaret folded her hands. She underestimated you. Underestimation is expensive. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the river. The morning sun reflected off the glass towers like blades. She thinks the house sale covers it. I said, fast cash, immediate possession, clean exit and relocation. Margaret added. There's a forwarding address filed with USPS. Where? Miami. Of course. Sunday, new beginning. No cold Chicago winters. She's leaving. Margaret said she thinks she is. At 8:41 a.m., my phone vibrated again. 31 missed calls. I finally listened to one voicemail. Daniel. Evelyn's voice trembled, not with sorrow, but strain. Why did the title company just call me? What did you do? I deleted the message. Margaret, I said, turning back toward her desk if she attempts to close. Despite the trust structure, what happens? She exposes herself to fraud. Wire fraud, specifically if funds move under false representation and the POA misuse. Breach of fiduciary duty. Potential financial exploitation. Criminal. If pursued, I nodded once. Notify the title company formally. Send certified copies of the trust. File a notice of dispute with the county recorder. And draft a petition for temporary protective order. Margaret's eyes sharpened. You're not stopping at the closing. No. What are you planning? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thin envelope. Inside was a dead instrument. I'd hired a forensic accountant 3 weeks ago quietly. Something about Evelyn's spending didn't align. Travis Lang had taken out a private bridge loan 6 months earlier. $500,000 high-interest short-term collateral non-personal guarantee. He was underwater. And yesterday morning through an intermediary, I purchased that debt. She doesn't know, Margaret asked softly. No. Does he? Not yet. Margaret leaned back slowly. So at 10 o'clock, she believes she's closing on a house she doesn't legally own to pay off a debt that now belongs to you. Yes. She studied me carefully. This isn't revenge, is it? No, I said. It's correction. At 9:15 a.m., we left for Sterling and Wyatt. My phone buzzed again. 37 missed calls. I turned it face down. Let her feel the silence. By the time we entered the lobby at 9:58 a.m., I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was clear. Evelyn had written her note in bold letters, but she hadn't read the fine print. And at 10 o'clock sharp, she was about to. At 9:59 a.m., the elevator doors opened onto the 42nd floor. Sterling and Wyatt believed in intimidation by architecture. Floor-to-ceiling glass, polished walnut, a reception desk carved from a single slab of marble. The kind of place where people signed documents that changed their lives and tried not to look nervous doing it. Margaret walked beside me, her heels striking the floor with quiet precision. 2 men followed at a measured distance, plain clothes, neutral expressions. Detectives Miller and Caruso. They looked like corporate executives. They were not. Through the glass walls of Conference Room B, I saw Evelyn. She was seated upright at the far end of a long table dressed in navy silk posture. Perfect. To her right sat Travis Lang, immaculate in a tailored gray suit, leaning back with artificial ease. Across from them, a young couple, early 30s. The husband had a doctor's posture, straight spine, careful eyes. His wife held a leather portfolio in both hands like something sacred. Between them on the table lay a cashier's check. Milunya Habendala. The air inside that room was thick with expectation. Margaret paused beside me. Ready? I've been ready. At exactly 10:03 a.m., I opened the door. The room fell silent. Evelyn's face drained of color. So fast it was almost clinical. For half a second, she looked as if she'd seen an apparition. Daniel, she said, standing halfway. The young couple turned in their chairs. Confusion flickered across their faces. Travis's jaw tightened. He recovered quickly, smoothing his tie. Well, he said lightly, look who decided to show up. I walked past him without acknowledging the remark and took the empty chair at the head of the table. Good morning, I said calmly. I'm Daniel Henderson. The doctor nodded cautiously. We were told you weren't able to attend. I'm very able. The title officer, a thin man named Peters, cleared his throat. Mr. Henderson, we were just preparing to finalize signatures. I'm aware. Evelyn's voice sharpened. Daniel, what is this? You had no reason to be here. I own the property. A tremor ran through the room. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her pen. You don't. I have power of attorney. Margaret stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the table with a deliberate resonant thud. Power of attorney, she said evenly, does not grant authority over assets held in an irrevocable trust. Peters blinked. Excuse me. Margaret opened the folder and slid a certified copy of the Henderson Asset Protection Trust across the table. The property at 14 Briar Glen Drive was transferred into this trust 12 years ago. Mr. Henderson is the managing trustee. The trust is the legal owner. Peters looked from the document to Evelyn. Mrs. Henderson. Evelyn's composure fractured. That's not possible. The deed, the quicklime deed filed yesterday, Margaret interrupted gently, was executed under an assumption of individual ownership. That assumption was incorrect. Travis leaned forward, his voice smooth but strained. Let's not overcomplicate this. The POA authorizes her to act on his behalf. On his behalf, Margaret repeated. Not on behalf of the trust. Silence. The doctor across the table slowly withdrew his hand from the check. What exactly are you saying? He asked. I'm saying, I replied quietly, meeting his eyes, this house is not for sale. Evelyn turned toward me as if I'd struck her. You can't do this. I already did. Her breathing quickened. Daniel, this is humiliating. It would have been far worse if it had gone through. Peter stood abruptly. We need to pause this closing immediately. I'm not proceeding until ownership is verified. The doctor's wife leaned toward her husband, whispering something urgent. He nodded and carefully slid the cashier's check back into his portfolio. Travis's confidence dissolved. A bead of sweat appeared at his temple. "Daniel," he said under his breath. "We had an understanding." "No," I replied. "You had an assumption." Margaret handed Peters another document. "Notice of dispute filed with the Cook County Recorder at 8:17 a.m. today. The transfer is legally contested." Peter scanned the page, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. Evelyn's voice dropped into something close to pleading. "Daniel, please. We can discuss this privately. We are discussing it." Her eyes flicked toward the young couple. Their optimism had evaporated, replaced by visible unease. "This is a misunderstanding," Evelyn insisted. "Daniel's been unwell. He doesn't always." "Careful," Margaret said softly. Evelyn stopped. The weight of those words settled heavily in the air. Travis pushed back his chair, standing abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We've invested time and resources into this transaction." "And you nearly invested wire fraud," Margaret replied evenly. The word hung there. "Fraud?" Travis went pale. The doctor stood his jaw tight. "We're leaving." "I'm very sorry," I said sincerely. "You deserve better than this." They exited without another word. The door closed. For a moment, only the hum of the air conditioning filled the room. Evelyn turned toward me, eyes blazing. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I told you to check again." Her composure collapsed. "You set this up?" "No," I said calmly. "You did." Travis grabbed his briefcase. "We should go." He moved toward the door, but Detective Miller stepped forward just enough to block the path. "Not yet," Miller said quietly. Travis froze. Margaret placed one final document on the table. "A formal notice of breach of fiduciary duty," she announced. "And pending petition for financial exploitation." Evelyn stared at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. "You're filing charges?" she asked. "That depends," I replied, standing slowly. "On how honest you're prepared to be?" Her eyes filled not with sorrow, but fear. For the first time that morning, she realized something crucial. This wasn't about the house, and I wasn't the one cornered. As we exited the conference room, my phone buzzed again. 37 missed calls. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. The note on the counter had been bold, but the fine print belonged to me. By noon, the rumor had already begun to spread. Real estate closings in Chicago's upper tier are like quiet theaters. People pretend discretion, but everyone watches the exits. Travis Lang, leaving Sterling and Wyatt, flanked by two plainclothes officers, was not subtle. Evelyn, walking 10 paces behind him, face pale, sunglasses, hiding what composure she had left less subtle. I didn't follow them. I went back to Margaret's office. The river outside moved with steady indifference. Barges pushed forward. Wind pressed against the glass. The city did not care about private implosions. Margaret closed the door behind us. "She'll call again," she said. "She already has. She'll try to frame this as confusion. It isn't." Margaret leaned against her desk. "Daniel, we need to decide whether this becomes a negotiation or an investigation." I removed my jacket slowly and sat down. "I want clarity first." She nodded. "Then let's finish mapping the damage." An hour later, the picture was complete. 6 months ago, Travis Lang launched a condo redevelopment project in River North. Overestimated demand, underestimated carrying costs. When pre-sales slowed, he secured a private bridge loan at an unforgiving interest rate, 12% short-term balloon payment. He missed the balloon. That's when Evelyn's spending increased. Wire transfers, designer purchases, a $48,000 consulting investment, flights to Miami. 3 weeks ago, I hired a forensic accountant. Not because I suspected an affair. Because I suspected fear. Affairs are emotional. Desperation leaves paper trails. The accountant delivered his report yesterday morning. The same morning Evelyn filed the quitclaim deed. Travis owed $527,000 plus penalties. The lender was impatient, and through a holding company structured cleanly and legally, I acquired the debt at a discount, which meant as of yesterday afternoon, Travis Lang owed me. Margaret studied the acquisition paperwork again. "You purchased his liability before she filed the deed?" "Yes." "So, she thought the house sale would save him?" "Yes." "And now the sale is dead?" "Yes." Margaret exhaled slowly. "This is layered." It had to be. My phone vibrated on the desk. "Evelyn." I let it ring. Margaret folded her arms. "Are you going to speak to her?" "Not yet. She'll show up here." "I know." And she did. At 1:37 p.m., the receptionist called upstairs. "She's here," Margaret said, glancing at her phone. "Very insistent." "Send her in." Evelyn entered like someone who hadn't slept. Her silk blouse was wrinkled. Her lipstick slightly smeared. She closed the door behind her with more force than necessary. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Margaret remained seated. "I suggest you lower your voice," Margaret said evenly. Evelyn ignored her. "You humiliated me," she said, turning to me. "In front of buyers, in front of Travis. You humiliated yourself." Her hands trembled, not with weakness, but fury. "This was a misunderstanding," she insisted. "The trust I didn't know. You didn't ask. You've been distant for months." She snapped. "You stopped sharing decisions. You act like I'm not capable." This wasn't about capability. She stepped closer. "Then what was it about?" I slid a thin folder across the desk toward her. She opened it. The color drained from her face for the second time that day. "What is this?" "Your solution?" I said quietly. Inside were copies of Travis's loan agreement, the assignment of debt, and a notice of demand. "You bought this," she whispered. "Yes." She flipped through the pages, her breathing quickening. "You can't." "I already did." Her eyes darted toward Margaret. "This is coercion." "No," Margaret said calmly. "It's asset acquisition." Evelyn looked back at me, something fragile breaking beneath her anger. "You were spying on me." "I was verifying." "You don't trust me." "Correct." The word landed hard. She swallowed. "You think this is about money?" she said, her voice dropping. "You think I'd risk everything for money?" "No," I replied. "You risked everything because you were afraid of losing it." Her eyes flickered. "There's more," I continued. I pressed a button on Margaret's desk speaker. A recording began to play. Evelyn's voice. Travis's voice clear. "She doesn't have long," Travis said. Lightly. Evelyn laughed nervous. "He's not dying." "Not today," Travis replied. "But you said the doctor mentioned vascular damage." There was a pause. "I just need the house sold," Evelyn said. "Once we close, we're clear." The recording stopped. Silence filled the room like rising water. Evelyn stared at the speaker as if it had betrayed her. "You recorded me?" "No," I said calmly. "You left your phone connected to the car system." She pressed her palms against her temples. "You twisted this," she whispered. "No," I listened. Tears finally formed, but they weren't for me. "They were going to ruin him," she said, voice cracking. "The lender was threatening litigation. I was trying to help. You were trying to rescue someone who should have failed on his own." Her shoulder slumped. "I was scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of being alone." The confession lingered between us for a moment. 17 years of marriage hovered in the air. Then she straightened slightly. "What do you want?" she asked. "I want control restored." "You already have it." "No," I said. "I want acknowledgement." Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. "Travis." She didn't answer. "My attorney is filing a petition this afternoon," Margaret said. "Financial exploitation, misuse of POA and asset freeze pending review." Evelyn's head snapped up. "You're freezing my accounts." "Joint accounts," I corrected until clarity is established. "You're destroying me." "No," I said softly. "I'm containing you." She stepped back as if the word had weight. "How many times did you call?" she asked suddenly. 37. She laughed once hollow and you didn't answer. I was reading. She looked at the note still folded in her hand. The backside. "Check again." She understood now. The house, the debt, the recording. Every move she made had already been anticipated. "You planned this," she whispered. "No," I replied. "I prepared for it." Her phone buzzed again. She turned toward the door slower now. At the threshold, she stopped. "You're not the man I thought you were." "No," I said quietly. "I'm exactly who I've always been." The door closed. Margaret looked at me carefully. "This escalates from here," she said. "I know." My phone remained face down on the desk. It didn't vibrate again. Not yet. 2 days later, Evelyn requested a private discussion. Not at the house, not at our club, not at the lake. At Margaret's office, neutral ground, which meant she finally understood the terrain. I arrived early. I always do. I prefer rooms before they're occupied, before the air is disturbed by emotion. Margaret had prepared a clean conference space this time. No marble, no panoramic skyline, just a rectangular oak table, a picture of water, 3 legal pads. Simple, deliberate. At 3:02 p.m., Evelyn walked in. No silk blouse today, no designer armor. She wore a beige sweater and minimal makeup. Her posture was different, not defeated, but recalibrated. She closed the door softly behind her. "Daniel," she said. Evelyn. Margaret nodded but remained silent. Evelyn sat across from me, folding her hands carefully as if any sudden movement might shatter something invisible. I want to talk without theatrics, she began. This isn't theater, she inhaled slowly. You've frozen our joint accounts. Yes, you've purchased Travis's debt. Yes, you've notified the county recorder. Yes, and you're preparing to file criminal allegations. I'm preparing options. Her jaw tightened. This is overkill. No, I said evenly. This is containment. The word again? She flinched. Daniel, listen to me, she said, leaning forward slightly. I panicked. After your stroke, the doctors weren't optimistic. They were cautious. You forgot entire conversations. You left the stove on twice. You missed your own follow-up appointment. I corrected those patterns. But I didn't know if you would, she insisted. I didn't know how long I'd be alone. So, you found someone. She hesitated. It wasn't like that. Then explain it. Silence. Margaret slid a legal pad toward her. Speak clearly, Margaret said. For the record. Evelyn glanced at her sharply. You're recording this. No, Margaret replied calmly. But clarity is useful. Evelyn exhaled. I met Travis through the club. He was charming, confident. He made me feel visible. I let the words settle. After your stroke, she continued, everything felt fragile. You pulled inward. You stopped talking about the future. You moved assets without telling me. I restructured the trust. Exactly, she said, without telling me. The trust predates you. That's not the point, she snapped, then softened. The point is I felt excluded, like I was waiting for the inevitable. The inevitable. You dying? The room fell quiet. I studied her face. There it was. Fear, raw and poorly disguised. You sold the house, I said slowly to prevent loneliness. I sold the house to secure stability. For whom? She didn't answer. Margaret intervened gently. Mrs. Henderson, are you aware that the POA does not extend to trust property? Yes, Evelyn said quietly. Were you aware at the time of filing? A long pause. No. And if the sale had gone through, I thought her voice cracked. I thought Daniel wouldn't contest it. Why? I asked. She looked at me directly. Because you don't fight. That almost made me smile. I fight quietly, I said. Her eyes filled. Travis's lender was threatening to sue him, she admitted. He said once the house sold, everything would reset. And you believed him? I believed I needed an exit. From what? From waiting, the word echoed. Waiting for my decline. Waiting for grief. Waiting for financial vulnerability. You didn't want a husband, I said calmly. You wanted insurance. That's not fair. It's accurate. Her composure began to crack. You were slipping away, she whispered. You stopped touching me. You stopped laughing. I was recovering. You were withdrawing. The accusation landed heavier than the financial betrayal. Recovery is not glamorous. It is slow, embarrassing, humbling. I didn't withdraw, I said quietly. I recalibrated. She shook her head. You shut me out. And you replaced me. The silence was suffocating now. Margaret finally spoke. Mrs. Henderson, do you deny discussing Mr. Henderson's life expectancy in relation to financial planning? Evelyn's face went pale again. You heard that recording? She said. Yes. She closed her eyes briefly. I was venting. You were strategizing. I corrected. Her voice rose slightly. You can't hold one conversation over my head and dismantle my life. This isn't one conversation. I slid another folder toward her. Inside were bank statements, wire confirmations, a beneficiary change request on my life insurance policy filed but not finalized. Her fingers trembled. I didn't submit that. You initiated it. It wasn't processed because I reversed it. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt you, but you were willing to risk me. Her breathing became uneven. Travis said you wouldn't live another decade anyway, she whispered. And you agreed. No, she said quickly. I didn't. You laughed. She covered her mouth with her hand. The room held its breath. I was afraid, she repeated. Fear explains, I said softly. It does not excuse. Margaret leaned back. Here are the terms, she said. Evelyn looked up slowly. No criminal filing if full cooperation is provided, Margaret continued. Divorce proceedings uncontested. Full disclosure of financial involvement with Mr. Lang. And written acknowledgement of POA misuse. Evelyn stared at the paper. Margaret slid forward. This ruins me socially, she whispered. No, I said quietly. Your actions did. She looked at me with something like recognition. You're not angry, she said. I replied yesterday. And today I'm clear. Her phone vibrated on the table. Travis, she turned it face down. How many times did I call? She asked again, almost to herself. 37. She let out a broken laugh. And you didn't answer. I was listening to what? To who you are when you think I'm not watching. The finality in my voice seemed to settle it. Evelyn picked up the pen. Her hand hovered for a long moment, then she signed. Margaret collected the documents. This becomes official tomorrow, she said. Evelyn stood slowly. At the door, she paused. I never thought you were capable of this. I never thought you were either, I replied. She left without another word. When the door closed, Margaret looked at me carefully. You're sure about this? Yes. Outside, the late afternoon sun was already fading. My phone buzzed once. Unknown number. I didn't answer. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a gray Tuesday that felt colder than it should have. Not criminal court. Civil, orderly, controlled, but no less devastating. Cook County Civil Division doesn't look like television. There are no dramatic spotlights, no raised voices, just fluorescent lighting, wooden benches polished by decades of anxious hands, and the quiet hum of lives being recalculated. I arrived alone. Margaret met me inside, files in hand, composed as always. Ready? She asked. Yes. Evelyn sat on the opposite side of the room. She looked smaller today. Not physically, but socially. Two women from the club sat 3 rows behind her, not beside her, behind, observing. Travis sat at the far end, jaw, tight posture, rigid. His attorney, a thin man with an expensive watch, flipped through documents with visible irritation. When the judge entered, the room stood. Judge Halpern was in his late 60s, calm, direct, the kind of man who had seen every version of deception and no longer reacted emotionally to any of it. We were called forward. Margaret spoke first. Your Honor, this is a petition for declaratory judgment regarding misuse of power of attorney, attempted transfer of trust property, and associated financial exploitation. The judge looked over his glasses at Evelyn. Mrs. Henderson, do you dispute the trust structure? No, Your Honor, she said quietly. Do you dispute filing the quitclaim deed? No. Were you aware the property was not held in your husband's personal name? A pause. No pro. Judge Halpern nodded once. Power of attorney grants authority within the legal scope of the principal's assets, he said evenly. It does not override trust ownership. Margaret handed forward certified copies. The judge scanned them and the debt assignment, he asked. Margaret gestured toward Travis. Mr. Lang secured a private bridge loan. Mr. Henderson lawfully acquired the outstanding note. Travis shifted in his seat. Judge Halpern turned to him. Mr. Lang, were you aware Mrs. Henderson intended to use proceeds from this sale to satisfy your obligation? Travis hesitated. Yes. And did you verify ownership of the property? His attorney interjected. Your Honor. Answer the question, the judge said calmly. No, Travis admitted. The silence that followed was surgical. Judge Halpern leaned back. This court finds the attempted transfer invalid. The property remains vested in the Henderson Asset Protection Trust. He turned toward Evelyn. As for misuse of POA, while ignorance may mitigate intent, it does not erase consequence. Her shoulder sank slightly. Margaret continued, Your Honor, we request temporary financial oversight and full disclosure of transactions initiated under PA authority. Granted, the gavel struck lightly. Travis's attorney rose. We object to the debt acquisition being weaponized. The judge looked at him with mild impatience. Debt acquisition is not weaponization. It is capitalism. A ripple of restrained amusement moved through the room. Travis's face wrinkled. The lender assigned the note legally, the judge continued. Mr. Lang remains personally liable. Travis swallowed hard. Judge Halpern closed the file. This court encourages resolution without further litigation, but let me be clear. Trust structures exist for protection. Attempts to circumvent them invite scrutiny. He stood. The hearing was over. No shouting, no theatrics, just irreversible clarity. Outside the courtroom, whispers began immediately. One of the club women approached Evelyn cautiously. I didn't realize, she murmured. Evelyn didn't respond. Travis moved quickly toward the exit, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I remained still. Margaret touched my arm lightly. You're done here? Yes. Evelyn walked toward me slowly. Her eyes were red but dry. You won, she said. I didn't compete. She let out a shallow breath. I never thought you'd go this far. I never thought you would. A faint bitter smile touched her lips. They're all talking, she said quietly, glancing around the hallway. That will pass. And Travis, he owes what he signed for. She studied me for a long moment. You could have destroyed him. I didn't. You could still press charges. I haven't. Why? Because destruction is noisy. And I was done with noise. I don't need punishment, I said. I need separation. She nodded slowly. And what am I supposed to do now? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was hollow. That's your responsibility. She looked like she wanted to argue. Instead, she whispered, I was afraid. I know. And now you're accountable. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. 3 missed calls. Not from me. From Travis, she silenced it. I didn't think you were capable of strategic cruelty, she said softly. It isn't cruelty, I replied. It's boundaries. She nodded once. Then she walked away. Margaret joined me near the courthouse steps. Protective order will hold, she said. Financial review in 30 days. Divorce filing can proceed cleanly. Good. She studied my face. You feel anything? Yes. Way to bar 1. Relief. Not triumph. Not vindication. Relief. The kind that settles in the chest like warm air after a long winter. As we reached the car, my phone buzzed again. I checked it. 37 missed calls. All from the first night. She had stopped calling after the hearing. Silence now. Real silence. I slid the phone back into my pocket. The house still stood. The trust remained intact. The debt had been acknowledged and the illusion was gone. For the first time in months, my heartbeat felt steady. Not because I had won, but because I no longer had to defend. 3 months later, I moved into a lakefront condo on the north side. Smaller than the house on Briar Glen, cleaner, intentional. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the water. In the mornings, the lake looked like brushed steel. By afternoon, it turned restless and blue. I kept the furniture minimal. A leather chair by the glass, a walnut desk, 2 framed photographs, one of my father in his Navy uniform, one of me at 35 breaking ground on my first development. No wedding photos, not out of anger, out of clarity. The divorce finalized without theatrics. Evelyn signed everything as agreed. No contest, no appeals, full financial disclosure. She retained what was legally hers, nothing more. Travis declared restructuring within weeks. I did not accelerate his debt. I did not harass him. I allowed the contract to perform exactly as written. That was consequence enough. On a quiet Sunday evening in March, as snow melted along the shoreline, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail. Evelyn. I stared at the screen for a long moment before pressing play. Daniel, her voice began softer than I remembered. I know I shouldn't call. I wanted to say I'm sorry. The word lingered. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was scared. Travis left for Miami. The project collapsed. I misjudged everything. I listened without moving. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I didn't think you would fight back. There it was again. Fight. I thought you would just let it happen. Silence on her end, breathing. I didn't realize you were protecting yourself, she continued. I thought you were withdrawing. I paused the message. The room was quiet except for the faint rhythm of waves hitting the breakwater. I walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside, folded neatly, was the original note. The paper had softened at the creases, but the ink was still bold. I'm done with you. The house is sold. Pack and leave. I turned it over. 2 words. Check again. Not dramatic, not poetic, just precise. I resumed the voicemail. I don't expect anything, she said. I just needed you to know I never wanted to hurt you. The message ended. No tears, no begging, just exhaustion. I didn't call back. Not because I hated her, but because the chapter had already closed. At our age, love without respect is a liability. Fear disguised as affection becomes manipulation. And silence, when chosen intentionally, is not weakness. It is sovereignty. The lake darkened as the sun dipped below the horizon. Lights flickered on across the shoreline. Small constellations of other lives unfolding in parallel. I made tea and sat in the leather chair by the window. 17 years is not erased in a courtroom. It fades in increments. In the way you stop reaching for a second cup. In the way the house no longer echoes. In the way your phone doesn't vibrate at midnight. Recovery taught me something I hadn't known at 40. Strength is not loud. It is structured. It is paperwork filed on time. It is knowing where the deed is recorded. It is understanding what you sign. It is choosing boundaries before resentment grows roots. My health improved. The cardiologist adjusted my medications. The tremor faded. My speech sharpened again. I returned to light consulting work not because I needed income but because I enjoyed clarity. Friends asked what happened. I never offered details. I simply said we misaligned, which was true. One afternoon, weeks later, I received a final message, not from Evelyn, from a number I didn't recognize. It was Travis, Mr. Henderson. The text read, "I've restructured the project. I'll be current on the note next quarter." I stared at it briefly, then I typed back one sentence. "Honor your agreements, no threats, no sarcasm, just expectation." He responded with "understood." I turned off my phone and placed it face down on the table. The air inside the condo felt different than it had months earlier in that marble kitchen. Less ornamental, more real. Sometimes in the quiet moments before sleep, I replay the image of that first afternoon, the red light on the keypad, the wind across the driveway, Evelyn's silhouette at the top of the stairs. I don't feel anger. I feel gratitude because that note forced clarity, forced preparation to surface, forced me to stop assuming partnership where alignment no longer existed. You can love someone deeply and still protect yourself. You can forgive without re-entering the fire. You can walk away without slamming the door. And if you've ever been underestimated, if someone assumed you would fold quietly, dissolve politely, or disappear conveniently, I hope you remember something simple. Read the fine print, protect your name, and if someone tells you the house is sold, check again.